Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Teruma is Perikei, Halacha Beis, and Halacha Gimel. We're learning today Daf Nun Dalet. Again, we left off Mamish on top of the Amid, and we are dedicating this class, L'Refuah Shalema, to Levi Halevi ben Leah. The Gemara is going to move on right now to the next case in the Mishnah, where you had one soft Truma that fell into 100 of Chulin, and prior to the owner removing what we are calling the replacement saw, prior to that, another soft Truma fell in. So the Mishnah had a machlokes. The Tanakama writes that the mixture is now meduma, and Rab Shimon says no. Rab Shimon says that when the first one fell in, since there was the ratio of 100 to 1, it was nullified. True, you have to remove a replacement, but it was already batal. So now actually you have 101 chulin. When the second one falls in, it's a avada batal. Yeah, you have to remove two replacements, but it's not meduma. The Gemara today will begin by explaining the machlokes, the underlying machlokes between the Tanakama or the Chachamim and Rab Shimon, and we're going to have two opposite ways of learning the Gemara. I know we perhaps should have started a few minutes earlier, but I'll do my best to learn both the Marav Fulda's understanding and the Rashirilio's understanding versus the Pnei Moshe that will have an opposite understanding. The Gemara is going to also speak about a case where Truma, that's Tamei, falls into 100 Cholin. Now, really what happens there is that we're going with our understanding of the Mishnah. Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai was Moida, even though they spoke about Truma and Truma. But here, let me just go this to when you have one soft Truma Temeya that falls into 100 Chulin, and you have to give one replacement to a Kohen. Question now will be, this is going to be a financial question that will go all the way until the Mishnah. Can the owner tell the Kohen, what yours that fell into mine was Truma Temeya? So what financial value did it have? The Me'etzim. It was good for fuel. The fact that we're going with the understanding that it became nullified, the fact that the one replacement sum will have the status of Truma Tohira, which is the way our sugya is going, I don't owe you Truma Tohira. Let's say the one saw of Truma Temeya, let's just say, is worth $100. One saw of Truma Tohira, let's say, is worth $1,000. He'll tell him, I'm going to give you the saw. You give me $900. In other words, I'm giving you the financial value of the Me'etzim, but I want to get the compensation for the difference. The Kohen says, what are you talking about? It was my Truma that fell in. It's not your Truma. The fact that my Truma became more valuable, it went from Tamei to Tar, that's mine. That's my benefit, not your benefit. Interesting debate. And the Gemara is going to say that that difference of the 450, the 900 should be Achloiku. Vadai, he owes him the Me'etzim. On the other, you have a question, and we're going to see how much we can speak about this whole idea of Mamin Hamut al Besafik. Yachloiku, really, that's Shita Sumchas. Normally, it's not Shitas Chachamim. Chachamim say Hametzim Chaveira Olavaraya. We'll see how much we can make this fit into our sunnah.
Rabbi,
yes.
When you say it belongs to the Kohen, is that because it was already given to him, or
yeah, the case was that was the case. That was the case of the Gemara. Yes. Now, the next Mishnah, Halacha Gimel, will move on to speak more about the dinam of Taruvas. We're learning Taruvas all the way until the end of the Perek. The Mishnah's cases is based on a certain mitzias. Let me speak about this phenomena, that when you have grain that's milled into flour, the volume of the flour won't always be equal to grain. When the grain is of higher quality, when you mill it into flour, you will actually end up with more volume of flour than the grain. And if the grain is of lower quality, then when you mill it, that makes more sense, and certain impurities come out, then you end up with a less amount of value. So what happens if grain of Truma falls into grain of Chulin, and you have the ratio of 100, but now when you mill it, there is a smaller volume. So of course, if both grains were of the same quality, so we say that proportionally, it's always the same. If they both got decreased, they both decreased the same. Why would we say otherwise? What we are going to be heading to is the following, is that if you have chulin, which is of a higher quality grain, and you have truma, of a lower quality. And when the grain of truma fell into the grain of chulin, you did not have the ratio of 100 to 1, but you were near. You had 99 to 1. So it was not nullified meduma. Now you, the owner, went ahead and you milled it into flour. Now that you milled it into flour, the chulin increased and the truma decreased. So it's batal. Not only is it batal, but you are allowed to mill it lechatchila. And in this Mishnah and Halacha Gimel, we're going to have the explicit rule that we call ein mevatlin iser lechatchila. By the way, these words you don't have in the Mishnah, but that's what the Gemara in Bavli, that's how we frame it. How does that jive with what I just said? That you are lechatchila allowed to mill these two grains, knowing that now the truma will be nullified. I know that we learned way back when we quoted the Toises Yontiv that says that the problem of ein mevatlin isa lechatchila is only that you're not allowed to be marbe beheter. Here you were not marbe beheter. Here you were grinding. However, which will explain it, our Gemara will not follow this approach. We're going to have something that is independent of it, and let's see how far we can get into that. And without any further ado, Chavra, let's see if we can finish the whole daf. Daf Nun Dalid, all the way on the top. So this case is the final case in the Mishnah, where you have a sot truma shunaf l'lameya. So really it's nullified. Elama, you have to remove a replacement saw. But v'loy hispik, prior to you removing the replacement saw, another saw of truma fell in. Machlokes Tanakama says, since you did not remove it, so really what we have here is 2 saw of truma in 100 of chulin. You don't have the ratio. Everything becomes meduma. Rab Shimon holds no. Rab Shimon says that since when the first one fell in, it didn't fall in both together. Number 1 fell in, then fell in number 2. When the first one fell in, we just had the words yesterday, kama batal. It was nullified. If it's nullified, it's you have to take off a replacement. You'll take off 2 replacements now. Says the Gemara, let me tell you what's really underlying this argument. It's a much broader argument. And we're going to learn the Gemara now the way most learn it, and then we'll repeat it, the opposite to Pnei Moshe. Rab Shimon Oimer, Yedi Asa Mikadashta. Let me tell you, these words in the Bavli is, Rab Shimon holds, Kol ha'oimed lizroik kizaruk dami. Rab Shimon, right, the Pnimiyas HaTorah is not stuck with the way things are b'mitzius right now. He always sees the potential of things. So let me say the following, Aviv. Since the owner knew that it fell in, and he's planning to remove it, we view the one that he will remove to be the kedusha of truma. Even though it's in there, we view it as if it's already removed, because he's going to remove it. So now, what do you have really? You have 100 of chulin. And the Rabbanan Amrin, that no, just because you're going to remove it, and after you remove it rabbinically, that one will be the truma, you did not remove it yet. The Chachamim say that only haramasa mikadashta, only you're removing it will sanctify it. You did not yet remove it. So now the truma is mixed in. It's a mixture. And now you have 2. Now you have 2 in 100, not 1 in 100. And therefore, it's now you have meduma. Right? That makes sense. And by the way, this shita is shitas Rab Shimon, that holds kol ha'omed lizroi kizarik dami, kol ha'omed kol haroi. I want to tell you that, truth be told, that everyone at times agrees to this logic. Kol haroi lebila, but sometimes Rab Shimon is the one that takes it all the way in all of the cases. What's amazing is that according to our understanding, the reason why Rab Shimon is lenient is only because the owner knew that it fell in. Since he knew it fell in, and he was oimed, he's going to be removing it. And when he removes it, that one will be the truma. All else will be the chulin. We view it as if one is already removed. Which would mean, according to this understanding, that if one fell in, but the owner did not know that it fell in, and then another one fell in, even Rab Shimon will hold that it's going to be meduma. The Pnei Moshe says exactly the opposite. Look inside the top of Pnei Moshe. Right, Rab Shimon Oimer Yidiyosem Mikadash, the Koloimer, the Mefarish Pluktayu, the Pligi, that the Pnei Moshe says they argue only Bishaloi Noida Loy Minafilas Orashoina. Ad Achash Shenaf Lashniyam. And the Pnei Moshe says, and why am I saying that? Because he has a raya from a Tosefta. that we're going to have in the next chapter, the Bechai Gavna, only then do they argue, which means, right, the last line above the Gemara and the Pnei Moshe. If the person knew that it fell in, listen to this, mutter lahatanakama, the Tanakama will be moida that it's mutter. Interesting. They're only...
Sorry, would we do this with a mixture of milk and meat?
No.
Why?
Because in milk and milk, you're not removing anything. It's not shayach over there. Here, when you have the ratio, it has to be removed. So could you say it's as if it's removed?
Got it.
That what? I'm sorry. That the Chachamim hold, if you know, it's going to be good. If you don't know, it's amazing. If you know, it's mutter. When you don't know, it's meduma. Rab Shimon says the opposite. That what? That when you know that the first one fell in before the second one fell in. So think about it. That can make sense. So you plan to remove the one, right? What will be the status of that one when you remove it? What will that status be? Truma, midrabanan. So it's not really nullified. There is already one that's going to be truma. So now when another one falls in, you got two of truma. Because you have to remove it. And since you did not yet remove it, Rab Shimon argues, and he says, we're just going to move on, that since you did not know that the first one fell in, so you don't plan to remove it, and midoy raisa, guys, it's batal b'roiv. Midrabanan, objectively speaking, it's batal b'meya. So it was batal. You're not planning to remove one because you don't even know that it fell in. So that is when you can say that if the second one fell in, the second one is also nullified. Let's move on. This is good. This is good stuff.
With our general rule with Rav Shimon, he goes by the cleanliness and the meaning, the deeper, I think it fits, right?
All fits.
That's his intention.
Since his intention is to remove it, the way everyone else learns is so we view it as if it's removed. According to the Pnei Moshe, since he intends to remove it, and when he will remove it, it will have midrabanan, the status of truma, so it's not really nullified. Now that you know that you're going to remove it, you can't say it's nullified. You know that you're going to be taking out one that will be truma. Before you're taking it out, it's called truma that's in it. I don't care that one of truma is in 100, but now there's going to be two of truma in 100. Okay, let's go weiter. Now, Tani, we learned in a Braisa, in the following case, truma tamei that falls into 100 saw of chulin tohoirin, and we are going right now, Aviv. We're not going with Chizkiah. Right, we're going with the shita that says that one saw has to be removed from the mixture to be given to the kohen. And even though we learned above that you have to be careful not to make that one in big loaves, but why not? Because the proportion of truma tamei is still in there, but that's only a little bit. But if you make them into small loaves, the kohen gets to eat all of it betara. In other words, it's falling into chulin tohoirin really almost fully transformed this product from Truma Tameya to basically Truma Tahoira. So now, Oimer L'Koyen, the owner is telling the Koyen who owned that Truma Tameya, I know that I have to give you a saw of Truma. I know that. But why should I give it to you for free? Do I owe you anything more than Demei Eitzim? No, I don't. Why not? Because when your Truma Tameya fell into mine, what was it worth? The value, the financial value. It was Truma Tameya. The kohen was not allowed to eat it. All it was worth was fuel. So let me go with my numbers. Let's say it was worth the fuel. If this as fuel is worth $100. Now it's worth $1,000. I have to give it to you. But I don't have to give it to you for free. I'm not going to charge you $1,000. I'm going to charge you $900. You take pro bono the value of what fell into mine, and the rest you have to pay. For who I'm Eloi, what does the kohen respond? I'm sorry. Techi sa truma shenafla lepachus mimeya shema ena medamasa sakri. What I gave to you was truma. It wasn't fuel. If fuel would fall into less than 100, wouldn't ruin anything. If this fell into less than 100, it makes it meduma. I know that it was tamei, but it was always truma. The eitzim midamen asakri, of course not. In other words, what I gave you by mistake, it fell in, was truma to meya. The fact that my truma, luckily, was transformed from tamei to tar, which means it increased in value. So what? If the coin says, if I own a house and the house goes up in value, what, you should make the profit off it? Why? It's not your house, it's my house. V'loi seifach mitnina l'koyin chayron. Do you not have to give truma away to any coin? Truma never belongs to you. You don't own truma. So are you telling me v'hu noisen loy demei eitzim? Instead of you giving truma, you're going to give it demei eitzim. You're not allowed to do that. You cannot make profit off something that's mine. That's what he's telling him. This is a great back and forth. This is a Choshen Mishpat question.
But the Kohen is making profit.
That's what the Kohen is saying. The Kohen says, even though your chulin helped transform my truma, thank you, but you cannot keep the profit from it. So my kedoin.
So the coin, I would say, listen, okay, no problem. You give me the part of the truma that you think is worth less. But still, I had give me my son.
Give me my son. That's what he's saying. That's basically what he's saying. So the Gemara says basically that we don't know how to resolve this, and therefore they apply a rule that could be called that mamain hamutal b'safik cholkin, which would mean that, let me go to my numbers, the 100 value of it, the chulin owner is moida that he owes, which he does. What are they fighting over? In my just number example, over the $900. So that $900, 450, you divide that into half. I want to say just the following, guys. The ground zero, for people that are trying to remember where we learned this is the sugya in Bava Kama, in Shor Shanaga Chasapara, right, the 5th chapter. The case over there is I have a shor that's still a tam, and you have a pata, and your pata is pregnant, and they discover your ubar dead near the pata. And what's the question? We don't know whether my shor is negicha was the one that killed the ubar, or whether maybe the pata miscarried before my shor damage, that I'm chayv to pay chatzi nezik for your pata because it's a tam is vadai. But what do you do with the demei vlad? So the Mishnah says a quarter of demei vlad. What's the logic of a quarter? Since we don't know, Mam and Amot l'b'savik cholkin, Mishnah says the Gemara that the Mishnah only follows Sumchas. That's the problem. Sumchas is the one that says that Mam and Amot l'b'savik cholkin. We do not paskin like Sumchas. The Gemara says the Chachamim emrim hamotzim mechavere olavaraya. In our case, the hamotzim mechavere would mean that the owner of the chulin, he's the one that has to give the replacement. So there's no question about that. Maybe not. See, that's the thing. Normally in the very good. Okay. Anyway, the problem with this Gemara L'chura would be that we don't paskin Maman Amatel B'Safik Cholkin, but there's two differences between our case and the case in Bava Kama. Case number one is that here we have a suffix in the halacha. There we have a suffix in the mitzias that might be different. We have a doubt in halacha. Number two, maybe they go hand in hand. Since over here we have a suffix in halacha, who's moitzi from whom? Because the truma belongs to the kohen. That's the thing. On the other hand, the owner has to remove the replacement sum. So it's not so simple. The kohen cannot go to the 101 in any case, in any scenario that we're learning until now. Can the kohen go into my property and take one? No, he cannot. The owner has to be the one removing a replacement sub because really it was batel. It's a rabbinic law that I have to remove it. I know why they said it.
he went and grabbed it.
That's what I was saying. It's not his. It's not his. I'm only allowed to grab something that the thing itself belongs to me. That's the general rule when it comes to Choshe Mishnah. That means that if you have my watch and I go into your house and I grab my watch, I get to keep it.
He'll say, "According to Rabbi Eliezer, that's mine." So I grabbed the one
That could be. Okay, anyway, in other words, here, maybe because it's difficult to determine who is the muhzak, so everyone will say that Maman Amutal B'Savik Cholkin. Let's move on. Guys, we're moving on in Taruvas. The next Mishnah's scenarios is a lot easier. I'm not saying that what we learned was hard, but it was special. It's special. I'm telling people that learn Taruvas, most of us here learn Taruvas, many people learn Smicha, we learned Chulin. We never learned this thing applied to Truvas. Sure, there's some nuances here that we didn't have over there. It's really geschmack. Next case, like we spoke in the intro, is very simple. And here's the thing, Dan. Grain. When you turn it into flour, depending on the quality of the grain, accordingly, the flour might be the same volume, because we're speaking always about volume. And that's good just to reiterate that. When we speak about an egg, we're not speaking about weight. This is important. We're speaking about volume, halachically. So it was a 1 to ratio of 101 in volume. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't finish the Gemara. Thank you. So now, Zog the Gemara, and I'll give you a similar case, which is mamish the same. Chad Barnash, there was a person who accidentally dropped his sa'odim in someone else's chitim. Now, first of all, in that case, if both of them were chulin, another thing that's very important to remember, that when you sell commodities, if you remember that was a Mishnah, I forgot in which Masechta. When I sell chitim, there is a certain tolerance. There's a certain percent. I forgot what the percent was, 2% or 1% or a small percent. Even if it's mamish impurities, pebbles, the buyer cannot claim, I bought a pound, you didn't give me a pound of grain. It came along with other stuff. There's a certain minimum amount of tolerance. That's the norm of impurities when you buy natural products. The amount of sa'odim that fell in was an amount that fell within that category, which means that the owner who's going to sell the whole mixture will get the value of chitim for those sa'odim. It was when I charge you for a pound, and if really only 99% of the pound was wheat, and the other 0.1 was anything, sa'odim, pebbles, dirt, other impurities, I charge for a pound, and that money stands, the financial stands. So the fact that a little bit of sa'odim fell into my chitim, I get to sell the chitim. So the owner of the sa'odim says, don't compensate me for the value of the sa'odim. You sold it. You sold my sa'odim, b'demei chitim. And that sale is valid. I want that money. Who gets the difference between the sa'odim and the chitim? It's the same thing. The sa'odim was nullified, but it wasn't nullified because he owes the value of it. Gewaldig.
None of these cases are we looking at whose fault it was. Or that.
Rabbi is pointing out that whose fault is not relevant here. It's not.
How that would impact.
No, it wouldn't impact, because the fact is that that's bottle, but the value was owed. The value became increased because he's selling chitim. Who benefited?
There's been a piece of the bag that's empty.
No, empty no. Has to be something. He's doing it by weight or by volume.
This case where it's buckle, you could say, oh, it doesn't matter. But let's imagine my truma made your chulin meduma.
Then it does matter.
And it's like, whoa.
Yeah, for sure. Also,
Question,
and he told him that the owner of the chitim, that he has to give to the owner of the sa'odim, the demei sa'odim, that's for sure. Because whatever they both agree to, you got to do. Now, the difference between the demei sa'odim and the demei chitim, whatever it is, a chitim is more expensive. It's another $2 of machlokes. So you give only $1. No, they applied the same rule, but it's all the same because something was bottle. Even though it was bottle, you have to compensate. Who owns it? Basically. That's more or less the question. Who's the balabas over it to be the one who benefits from the increase in value? And now we're moving on to Allah Gimel. So let me go back to my drush over here, which is that whenever you mill grain, the volume of the flour could be the same. if the grain is of high grade quality, the volume of the flour will be more. If the grain is of low grade quality, then the volume of the flour will be less. And the Mishnah now will speak about scenarios in which, together with this fact, you have a taroivis. So truma, everything is there's no tuma and tummy, so at least we can take out that extra layer. You have a soft truma, falls into 100, so therefore it's nullified. Prior to anything happening, prior to you removing the replacement saw, v'tachanan, the owner of now the 101, he went ahead and he ground it all up, and all of it became diminished in size. Now, the Mishnah says you're not going to have a problem. Why won't you have a problem? Just like the chulin got diminished, so did the truma. So if you started with one saw of truma into 100 of chulin, there's no reason to say the chulin got diminished more than the truma. Everything got diminished proportionally. Kshem shepachasu achulin, kach pachasa truma, and shalom al Yisrael. And therefore, umuter, okay, they diminish proportionally. Dafnun daladam at base. Let's go in the opposite case. You have a saw truma shenafla lapachus mimeya, and therefore what happens? Aviv miduma, and you paskin miduma. And now it was low, it was high quality grain. Now you went ahead and you ground it all up, and now there's a greater volume. Can you say that right now it's no longer meduma? No, you cannot. Because even though the chulin increased in volume, so did the truma when they were of the same high grade quality. Kshem shohisiru achulin, just like the chulin increased, kachoisira truma, and therefore it continues to be asur. However, zok the Mishnah, but im yodu shechitin shel chulin yafais mishal truma. But if you know that the chulin wheat is of higher grade, which would mean aviv, that the chulin flour now has a greater volume. Obviously, we're speaking about a case where it was 1 in 99. In other words, it was meduma, but it was almost good. Now that you ground it up, now we know, because when we know that the grade of chulin was greater quality, which means that in flour, there's more chulin. And the truma did not increase, or if it was a bad quality, it decreased. So now we have the ratio of 1 in 100, 1 in 100. We don't say, since it was already declared meduma, it remains meduma. We never say that. We already learned before. The Mishnah will say in a moment, when you have bona fide meduma, and someone else, b'shoigeg, adds more. We don't say, since it was meduma, it stays meduma. We don't say that. By the way, Kevin, here's where you can compare it to meat and milk. If the ratio changes, I know the Mishnah this is the Mishnah that says that if you did it the mezid, they penalize you. But if it happened, now the Mishnah, our Mishnah, did not say whether you can do it lachatchila or not. The Gemara will say that you could. That's what we're getting to. So now mutar, because now we have the ratio of 101. Next case in the Mishnah, saw truma shenafla lapachos mimeya. So here you have a normal case of meduma, and you're not going from grinding. No. You have 99 chulin, you have 1 truma, and some more chulin fell in. How much more chulin? Enough to now make the ratio 101. So the Mishnah says, im shoigeg, if it fell in there not with the intent of being mevatel the isur, then muter. But if it was added there to be mevatel the isur, then asur. In other words, using the words in the Bavli that asur levatel isur lechatchila is a rabbinic prohibition, and for that, the Chachamim penalized you if you violated their prohibition, b'meis. I want you to know, and hold this for the next year, that there's an Avnei Miluyim that argues from our Mishnah, the rule that ein mevatlin isur lechatchila, we know from halacha, is across the board. The Mishnah teaches us this rule by truma. The Avnei Miluyim argues that truma, the isur of being mevatel, is a isur d'oraisa, not an isur d'rabbanan. It's a lot more chamor here, which is a big chiddush, that even though it's asur mid'oraisa, b'shoigeg it's going to be okay. Why would truma be different than all the other isurim? Because by truma there's a mitzvahs asay of guarding the truma. Guarding the truma would mean guarding it for it not to become tamei. Guarding it also means guarding it for it not to disappear. guarding it for it not to become destroyed. There is an obligation to guard the truma. And therefore, have to remember how this works. That would lead you on the side that you could be mevatel it to make it okay. You have to guard it. You have to take care of it. I'm gonna have to look up the Avnei Miloim. I know that there was something by the Achronim that say Truma is different than everything else, and that's going to be relevant for the next year. Okay, let's go right.
For the case where like the Truma was of worse quality, so then therefore became nullified, aren't you supposed to take from the best quality for Truma?
Yeah, but also don't forget that if I have a pile, I have to take from this pile the best of the pile. But if all of it is of low grade quality, I'm not chayiv to go get another pile and then to put them together. Min hamukav, I don't have to do that. From what I have, I give the best from what I have. It's all relative. Okay, good. Okay, now let's go, Chavre. So the Gemara is referring back to the first case of the Mishnah. The first case of the Mishnah was that you started out with a bittul, Truma fell onto Chulin, you had the ratio of 101, you went ahead and you milled the grain. We're speaking about low grade quality grain into flour. Everything was diminished. So the Mishnah says, I know that everything diminished, but there's no problem here, because just like the Chulin got diminished, so did the Truma get diminished, so the ratio, the proportionality of the ratio remained the same. Says the Gemara, this is not only true where we know that the Truma diminished together with the Chulin, when we know that they uniformly, that they proportionally are the same. Even, this is amazing, a big chiddush over here, even if we know that only the Chulin diminished in size, when we know that the Truma remained the same. I know the Mishnah spoke out the opposite case, l'chumra. The Mishnah never spoke about this case. So you began with bittul. What we learned in the Mishnah is that you can go from meduma to mutter. Okay. Can you go from mutter to meduma? Says the Gemara, no. When the grain fell in, now that it already became nullified, now it's nullified. If you grind it up right now, even though right now the chulin got diminished, and the truma remained the same, you're not going to say, as a choizer v'neir, you don't say that. Because once something was already nullified, it remains nullified. I'll give you a good mashal to this. What I was thinking yesterday when I was preparing this. If I have the ratio of 101, what happens if someone takes a little bit out?
And you know that they took.
And you know that they only took the chulin. It fell on the top. You took from the same thing. V'haraya, when you take a replacement saw, why don't we start restricting? First you have to mix it, then you take the why. We don't say that. Once it's nullified, it's nullified. That's a big chiddush. Adrabah, if it's not nullified, it could become nullified by grinding it or by adding more chulin b'shoigeg. But once something is no longer meduma, it's no longer. That's a very big stave.
Does the owner need to know about it for the business?
So now that we learned today's shir, let's go with everyone else. L'chayda, the owner needs to know about it. Let's go with that. Not what the Pnei Moshe is saying. Okay, everyone else learns that your knowledge that it fell in there, and now you know that the halacha says that it's batel. It was batel. Okay. Tony, we learned in a brayso. This is interesting then. Grain, guys, grain has impurities to it. We call that bran. I want you to know, Aviv, that when the bran is not crushed yet, all of the truma is truma. When I separate, if I were to separate truma from kernels, which is what people normally do, even though you have the outer part, you have the inner part, when it's connected, it's all truma. But when you grind it up, you separate the bran from the kernel. When that happens, it's amazing. The bran no longer has kedushas truma. When you separate chulin, the bran from the grain, we don't say that the bran doesn't count. The bran, the tenophis, counts. So there's a big leniency. Because that's going to mean, now that we established that you don't go from mutter to asr, but when you have meduma, you can go at any point from meduma to permitted, once you have the ratio of 100 to 1. So even if you didn't have the ratio when the grains of truma fell into chulin, when you begin to grind it up, forget about the increase of volume, which is what our Mishnah was talking about. The Gemara is speaking about another phenomena that happens when you grind it up. When you grind it up, you separate the chaff from the good. The moment that happens, amazing. The chulin tenoifes, even though you can argue is not oichel, has a din of chulin. The tenoifes of the truma loses its status of truma. So all of a sudden, if you had close to the ratio of 101, you're going to hit 101. And I'll say the whole thing by heart. And not only is the tenoifes of chulin counting, the tenoifes of truma you discount, the tenoifes of truma goes over to the chulin side. That's what the Braisa says. Funny. Ein tinoife shel truma mitztarefes im truma le'eser im achulin. Avol tinoife shel chulin, yes, mitztarefes im achulin. That's the first step, not the second step. The first step is that the tinoifes, the bran that now is not connected to the kernel of chulin still counts as chulin in order for you to have the ratio against the truma. You know what this Braisa did not speak about? The Braisa did not speak about the tenoifes of the truma. Can you count it towards the chulins? That's the Gemara's kasha. Baby boy, okay. Can we push it even more? Could we even say that the tenoifes shel truma ma'ushet itztarif imachulin lahalis imatruma? Can we go that far? Says the Gemara, yes, you could. Now, where did we have this conversation? Not concerning the mixture of truma and chulin, but we had this discussion when it came to the mixture of mutter and asur, not basar v'chalav kevan. But there we're speaking about eggs. And just to know, guys, that if you have an egg that has in it an unhatched chick, that egg has a din of a nevela. If such an egg was cooked with other eggs, so the general rule is you have to have 60 to 1. The shells don't have a din of a nevela. Not only do the shells of the kosher eggs count for the ratio, the shell of the unhatched egg nevela does not count for the problematic one. But Rav Huna says that you can add the shells of the nevela, which is not nevela, to the kosher side to get to the ratio. So therefore, just like he said it by the eggs, you can say the same thing, that the tenoifes of the truma actually goes over to the side of the chulin. Minma do amar Rav Huna, that klipe isur, they themselves are mitztaref leheter. Ado amra, tenoifes shel truma mitztarefes im achulin lahalis es truma. This is mamish gevaldig. Yep, sure.
So if I give some truma with the kayan, right? And he goes and splits out the bran and the what do you call it? That bran does not have the halakha of truma. He can go and have it with the Yisrael.
Yes, he could. I want to make it clear that financially the bran was given to the kohen, but the status of truma
Doesn't have the sanctity of truma.
goes away from it. That's very important to repeat. That when you had the whole natural stalk,
The holy.
if I gave him the stalk, the whole thing is truma. But the moment I separate it, only the kernel retains the kedusha of truma, and everything else halachically is not called. Fascinating, yeah.
About Gezel HaShevet and about when exactly are you supposed to give it to the Kohen?
Well, giving it to the kohen, let me say, there's an expiration date, and that's a vidui maisris. It's amazing.
I'm about saying in the process of the truma we spoke about bran with bran, without bran, grinding it.
So Rabbi Mendel is just pointing out that even though we learned that if I have olives, I'm not allowed to give it to the kohen as olives. I have to give it to him as oil, ideally, because it's going to give him too much work. We clearly differentiated between olives and oil. The Gemara differentiated between this case, between giving something less pure to more pure. It takes less amount of effort, and I can give it then. And you know what? Maybe it's beneficial for the owner to do the effort and to keep the brand. Because once he separates that, the brand, anything that's not the real oichel, no longer has the status of truma. A new case, says the Gemara. So saw truma. This is a new. This is a brayse, but this is a new case. Saw truma shenaf l'lameir. Guys, everything here again, everything, there's no more tamei and tar, everything is great. You have a soft truma, falls into 100, which means you have the ratio, it's batal. If you remember the zunin, where did we have the zunin? It was either I think it was in the beginning of Masechta Shvius. Guys, when you grow grains, there is some product that looks very similar to grain. That's actually a bit poisonous. It's called zunin. In English, it's called darnel. It resembles the wheat, but it's not edible for humans. So therefore, something that's not oichel adam is exempt from truma. So he's saying, "Sa truma shenaf lameya, ein atom moitzi zunin shaba." You do not deduct the darnel of the chulin to make the calculation. You get it? In other words, even though the same idea, we're speaking about klipa, now we're speaking about the zunin. Danny, the zunin that grows with the chulin counts towards the chulin. The zunin that grows with the truma, aleph, does not count with the truma. And therefore, beis, that was the whole thing of Boya Rav Bibi, it goes into the cheshbon of the chulin. Ein atom moitze, we're speaking about, don't deduct the zunin of the chulin to say that, no, you counted with the chulin. Even though zunin is exempt from truma, fine. So it's not included in truma, but it's included in chulin. If you have a saw of truma that fell into less than chulin, but you're very close, so you are allowed atom moitze zunim shaba. You remove the zunin from the truma, and now you will have the right ratio. Same thing v'chein, another rule. Loig yayin solul. So you have wine that was filtered. You filtered the sediment out, and then you have wine in which you didn't filter the sediment out. Same concept. When the sediment is in the wine, it's truma. When you filter it out, it's no longer truma. So what happens? Loig yayin solul. That the yayin solul is truma. So you have one loig that falls into 100 unfiltered wine of chulin. Don't argue that, you don't have really 100, because to make it equal, you got to remove the sediment from the chulin, and if you were to do that, then you're not going to have the ratio. No, ein atom moitze shumarim shaba. But in the opposite, if you have a loig yain achor of truma, and it fell into just a little bit less than 100, you are allowed to say, no, it's batel. Why is it batel? What are you talking about? I have a whole loig of wine. No, deduct the shumarim. It's all consistent. Even though when they are mixed together, they have the same status. If you were to remove them, it loses the truma. You are allowed to do it to come to the ratio. It's all based on the fact, we're going to read it until the end of the Amid. It's all based on the fact that it's batel b'roiv midoy rais. Now, so that was the case that the Mishnah spoke about, and the Mishnah also spoke about a case, right? Aviv, we're going from bad to good. When the saw of truma fell in, there was not the ratio of 100 to 1. Meduma. Happened to be that the chulin was superior quality grain, so when you grind it, it becomes more. The truma was inferior quality. The Mishnah spoke b'di'evet that if you ground it all up together, now you got more. Now you got the ratio. Says the Gemara Tanei, don't only learn the way we learned it in the Mishnah. It's more than that. That if you know that by grinding it up, you're going to increase the chulin, and you're going to decrease the truma, and you're going to get the ratio of 101, you are allowed to do it lechatchila. And I'm going to give you a heads up. We'll stop over here. Not because of what we learned in the Tosfos Yantiv, that whenever you're not being marbe beheter, you can be mevatel isol lechatchila. I'll tell you right now, the general, the darkoi, when you get grain most people don't eat grain. What's the norm way of what's the next step? The next step of grain is that you make it into flour. You understand? Means don't do something that you wouldn't have done. Why are you doing it? Because you want to nullify the Isser. Here you're doing something that anyways would have been done. You're following the normal steps of preparing the grain. That's a big difference here. Because you don't have to go to not being marba beheter. That's the general reason, but the Gemara is going to have a beautiful, nuanced machlokes, how to understand this. We'll stop over here to be continued just the next year. We're finishing the Hilchas Taruvis. So next year, bring your, whoever has an art scroll, bring your ready. Trumas number 2. Trumas is the largest Masech